I'm very happy to have Michael Johnston with us. He is from Health Canada. That is the first time, to my knowledge, that we have Health Canada here as well. I was formerly as a representative in the Pharmacopoeia, and we had always very good contact to Health Canada here in Europe.
Excellent.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm Mike Johnston. I'm a research scientist in the Biologics and Genetic Therapies Directorate, and I'm responsible for our Nanomedicines laboratory. So just a standard disclaimer, these are my opinions. If I do mention a product, it's not an endorsement or anything about that. So just a brief introduction to Health Canada. Health Canada is a Canadian federal department of health, and we regulate many products, biologics, consumer goods, foods, medical devices, natural health products, so that would be like herbal remedies and traditional medicines, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and the newest one is cannabis, as well as toxic substances. Health Canada doesn't provide direct health care to the Canadian public, but we are responsible for the federal oversight of the system. And also, and this is probably important for this talk, Health Canada approves drugs or pharmaceuticals, but we're not responsible for the marketing or scheduling of those products within the country. That's dependent on the individual provinces. So Health Canada will say you can sell this in the country. The provinces will say we are willing to pay for it. So as with most organizations, Health Canada has separate regulatory pathways in place for generics and biosimilars. Some important points are, one, either the biosimilar or generic has to be a marketed Canadian reference product. We encourage sponsors to seek regulatory guidance early in the submission process. And currently, BGTD, which is the directorate I'm part of, is undergoing a three-year pilot to explore the potential for scientific advice meetings early in the development process. So if this is similar, you could imagine this being applied to other directorates as well. And also important for this discussion, in Canada, the authority to declare two products interchangeable rests with the provinces, not with the federal government. So we will approve a product, but it is up to the provinces to say, we will substitute the generic for the originator. So how do we currently regulate non-biological complex drugs? Well, we rely on existing authorities within the Food and Drugs Act, and in 2011 we released a policy statement regarding the working definition for nanomaterials, but we don't have any specific regulations. And this working definition allowed us to ask sponsors to self-identify whether their product contained nanomaterials or not. And it's a pretty general working definition. Basically, it says Health Canada considers any manufactured substance or product, component, material, ingredient, device, or structure to be a nanomaterial if it is within the nanoscale in at least one external dimension, or it has internal or surface structures in the nanoscale, or it is smaller or larger than nanoscale but exhibits nanoscale properties and phenomena. So for the purpose of the definition, we define nanoscale as 1 to 100 nanometers, and then nanoscale properties or phenomena means properties which are attributable to the size and their effects. And the term manufactured includes engineering process and the control of matter. And if we look at the products, or some of the products we've approved using our existing regulations, we can see we approved a number of lipid-based or liposomal-based products, protein nanoparticles, antibody drug conjugates, and pegylated proteins. This isn't an extensive list. It's just an example of some of the products we've approved. So how is Health Canada going to handle follow-on NBCDs? Well, unfortunately, at present, no NBCDs are marketed within Canada, and we don't have any specific guidance documents for those products. We are aware and utilize published positions and guidance from other regions. We have an internal working group focused on this issue, and we are engaged in international harmonization efforts. And at the current time, a follow-on NBCD would be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And again, I've mentioned this a couple times, Health Canada encourages sponsors and other stakeholders to communicate with the responsible regulatory authority early in the development process. Although we don't have any regulations specific to NBCDs, we do have a number of regulatory initiatives undergoing. And these all started in 2015 when the new government came in. The first one is we're amending the food and drug regulations for environmental assessments. Currently, the environmental assessment of medicinal products falls under the Environmental Protection Act, and they're treated like an industrial product. The intent is to move that assessment under the Food and Drug Act, and that draft guidance hasn't been published yet, but I can say there will probably be a specific section on nanomaterials in those regulations. We're undergoing a fairly large regulatory review of drugs and devices, and the idea here is we are looking to improve the Health Canada's regulatory system to increase efficiency and access to therapeutic products. There are 14 projects in this review. So we're looking to align reviews for certain drugs. So as I mentioned, in Canada, Health Canada approves the drug. The provinces decide whether they're going to pay for it. So in effect, the drug goes through a second review with the provinces. The idea here is that we would do those reviews simultaneously, provide early scientific advice to manufacturers, looking at the use of foreign reviews and decisions, work sharing with other international regulatory authorities. There was a pilot project that was carried out with Australia, Singapore, and Switzerland, looking at splitting up the review process for a product, and that product was marketed or approved both in Australia and Canada. And one of the big pushes from the current government is to improve access to biosimilars, biologics, and generic drugs. So this regulatory review is open to comments. The comments for the biologics have closed, but the generic drugs are not. The notice of intent hasn't gone out yet, so there's still time to comment on that. So I would suggest if you do have comments or you feel that follow-on NBCDs are important, this would be a good place to make those positions known. We also have a regulatory research program that's ISO 9001 certified. As I mentioned, I run a nanomedicines laboratory, and a colleague has a stem cell laboratory that focuses on exosomes. We also have a number of international initiatives we're involved with, the OECD, ISO TC 229, the ICH, as well as the IPRP, and the Canada-US Regulatory Cooperation Council Nanotechnology Working Group. So some conclusions. Existing regulations are being used to regulate non-biological complex drugs. A number of products have been marketed in Canada, but there are currently no NBCDs have been marketed. I'm not going to say reviewed, but I'm going to say marketed in this case. We have a number of initiatives and currently underway to impact how NBCDs are regulated by Health Canada. And again, it's the third time I mentioned this, we really encourage early consultation. Please contact us, talk to us early, and we're also actively engaged in harmonization efforts with other regulatory agencies. Our website is incredibly difficult to navigate. It is, putting this together, it was immensely frustrating. So I found some links that are useful. The two most important ones are the Office of Regulatory Affairs in TPD and the Office of Regulatory Affairs in BGTD. So this is where you would send questions if you're submitting a product and you need some information on on the regulatory process. These are the two offices you would look at. Here's our policy statement on Health Canada's working definition for nanomaterials. Here's the R2D2 regulatory review, and then we have our policy on biosimilar drugs, and down here the Canada Gazette, so that's the national newspaper. So in the Canada Gazette is where announcements for changes to a regulatory process are posted. It's obscure, I realize that. I didn't know about it until I started looking for it. So I included it there. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than welcome, happy to answer this.
Thank you very much, Michael, as well in speeding up and assisting us a little bit in the timing. Urgent question. Yes, please. Wait for the microphone, please.
Thank you. Could you please touch on hard versus soft materials, say lipid-based materials on the soft side versus iron oxide on the harder materials, just as examples?
Sure. So we've approved, liposomes would be a soft material we've approved for market, and we do have iron sucrose particles marketed in Canada. Both were reviewed under existing regulatory pathways.
Is there a difference the way you address each one?
We would look at the product on a case-by-case basis, but the overarching guidance would be the same. There wouldn't be any specific guidance for one or the other.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.